Welcome to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough, the Parenting Through Challenges podcast. I am your host, Angie Grandt, generational healing specialist. And for this week's episode, I actually wanted to follow up on last week's episode. So last week, we were talking about co-parenting, and I was really walking through some key mindset shifts to be thinking about when co-parenting. And when I use the word co-parenting, I really am referring to anyone else that you are sharing in this parenting relationship with. Your co-parent might be your partner or spouse. It might be your new spouse or partner that is not your kids' children. Your co-parent might be your ex-partner or ex-spouse. It might be your parents, or perhaps your brother or sister who's co-parenting with you. It might be a good friend. In today's families, there are just so many ways that families are structured. And I want the takeaway message for this episode to be that no matter who is in your child's life, no matter what legal or non-legal or genetic or non-genetic relationship you have with that person, if they are a large part of your child's life, a large part of raising your child or children, that consider them as a co-parent. And sometimes this might mean that you have multiple co-parents in your family dynamics. Because when we think about the things that I want to go through today, and also the things that we went through in last week's episode, I think that it's easy to think about co-parenting just with your kid's father or mother. But it goes so much farther beyond that, because these tips that I'm going to share today, which I gathered them through my family coach certification that I went through a couple of years ago. But these are so just good parenting tips to help your kids. Because at the end of the day, when we're thinking about parenting and what that relationship looks like, it's always about the kids. Yet we lose sight of that so easily. Which brings me to one of the things that I want to talk about is that in our parenting relationship or co-parenting relationship, when we don't know better, sometimes we lose sight of our goal of helping our kids, right? We'll say that what we're saying and doing is for our kids, but sometimes in some of these co-parenting relationships, our anger with our ex, or anger with maybe our ex's new partner, or our anger with our own parents for maybe the way that they're parenting our kids is different than the way that they parented us, or whatever that might be, that we easily let our own anger for the other person grow bigger than what we're showing love for a kiddo. So I say that because I want you to reflect on that is, can you love your child more than you're angry with the other person? We of course at a cognitive level want to say, of course we love our kiddo more, but oftentimes that isn't what our actions end up communicating to others. Instead, what our actions end up communicating is that we're trying to be the better parent, or we're trying to one up the other parent, as as if to be the favorite parent. But our kids don't need a favorite. They need a a family who is being themselves and loving loving the child, right? So So that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight for you is, can you set aside your anger and really keep bringing back to the forefront of your mind that idea of loving your child more than you want to be angry, than you want to be the favorite or the best. And sometimes that requires us to swallow our ego a little bit. It also requires us to really have a keen awareness that we are going to have a different relationship with our kiddo than the other parent does, than our partner does, than the child's other biological parent does, that we are going to have a different type of relationship, and we don't have any control over the type of relationship that they have with the kiddo. And we shouldn't, yet we still try to control the types of consequences they use, the types of rewards that they use, the types of rules and structures and routines that they use. And while, yes, consistency helps kids a ton, especially when there has been some type of breakup. Consistency helps a ton. But that doesn't mean it's my way or the highway. It means, can we communicate in a way to meet both of our needs so that we can support our kids? Again, putting our kids first. It's easy when you've gone through a breakup to feel like your way is a better way. Your way is better suited for your kiddo. And oftentimes we forget to ask the other parent why they want to do things the way that they want to. We get so stuck on digging our heels in that we lose sight of our kiddo because we're trying so hard to assert our ideas, our way of parenting, as if it's better. But our kids need both or many parents to help shape who they're supposed to be. Of course, none of this applies if there is, abuse involved or things like that. But this is about, I'm talking about when parents, when co-parents, when supportive family members who are actively involved in the child's life aren't on the same page. It takes one person to really shift that around to really say that my goal is to get us all on the same page for the kiddos. It feels like in the moment, like, well, I can't change until they change, or they're never going to change. I say that because I've been there. And I had a very rigid mindset about it was my way or the highway, that I knew what was best for the kids. And I really didn't take the time to listen to the other parent to find out why they wanted to do things the way that they wanted to do them. I didn't really care, quite frankly, because I felt like their parenting style was not in our kids' best interest. But at the end of it, what wasn't in our kids' best interest was us disagreeing and fighting and putting our kids in a position where they felt like they had to choose one parent over the other. So having communication is so key when you're co-parenting, whether it's about things like having shared calendars or making sure that there's a consistent communication system is really key so that the kids are never in the middle of trying to do the communicating for the adults. It's really also key that if there are disagreements, like deciding on where the kids go to school or extracurricular activities or things like getting cell phones, if if the two parents have tried to use good communication tools, or one of them has tried, and it isn't going anywhere, bringing in an outside neutral party is really key, because at the end of the day, it's about the kids. It's about getting on the same page for the kids. It is never about us winning. And I'm going to keep saying that because, one, I was there and I didn't realize it in the moment how hard I was trying to prove that I was the better parent, but also that I I only had one track in my mind about the way that the other parent was parenting could not have possibly been in the kid's best interest. So having a good communication system is really key, and pulling in outside neutral help is also key when you can't communicate. I would also say that if there are things that your kiddo is bringing to you that are about the other parent that you disagree with, that the first step, whenever possible, should be really giving your kiddo the tools to empower them to assert what matters to them. Of course, we never want to put our kids in a dangerous position, but sometimes when we go to the other parent and say, this was reported to me or that was reported to me, we end up creating more tension in the relationship between the other parent and our child, or between us and the other parent, which again breaks down that communication, which is so key to putting our kiddo first. So, whenever possible, empower your kiddo to assert what matters to them as opposed to you stepping in and doing it for them. Along the lines of communication, whenever possible, if there are ways to have family meetings or even family outings where you're all going together, it is so ideal for the kids. If if our kids can see their parents' partners, grandparents all getting along, it has the potential to build in them more resilience, a greater sense of self-worth, the empowerment to do things when they're hard. And it shows our kids that they matter enough that we were able to put aside our own adult problems for them. And think about how really empowering that is for our kids. Think about what we're really teaching our kids when we're able to set our own problems aside for the sake of our kids. I um I've also recently heard about this idea of like house nesting or family nesting, essentially meaning that, or bird nesting, I guess it's called, which essentially means that the child has a home and the parents are the ones who have the placement schedule, right? Mom lives at home with the child for a while, for their week or their weekend or their 4 days. And then when it's dad's turn, mom leaves and dad lives in the same home, which creates such a greater sense of stability for the child that they don't have to live out of a suitcase or, have clothes at one parent's house that are different, that can't go back and forth between homes, right? When their things are their things, it it just really has the power to just help kids have so much more stability in their life. If that isn't possible, um, you could also consider having a pet that goes with the child, that goes with them from home to home, which isn't quite the same, but something consistent that travels with them that helps create that sense of comfort and sameness for the child, as well as that empowerment and responsibility that can come with taking a pet as well. I would also say that it is helpful if you know your the co-parent, whether you're in a relationship or not, but when you know the co-parent's human design type, because it allows you type and profile, because it allows you the it empowers you to be able to communicate to them in a way that is aligned with their energetic needs. And so, for example, if if I know that my co-parent is a generator type, but I'm trying to ask them open-ended questions like, what do you want the placement schedule to look like? Or what would you like to happen for holidays? It creates an energetic frustration because I'm asking questions that are harder for that energy type to respond to versus saying, would you like an every other year holiday schedule? Right? Posing a yes, no question, for example. Or when you know about their profile lines, really understanding how that influences the way that they interact, the way that the other parent might come to school events or school conferences, or the way that they might communicate with your child can be really insightful as you're co-parenting because it just gives you such key insights about what they might need so that you can empower the co-parent instead of beating them down, instead of putting them in a position where it's energetically more challenging to engage in this co-parenting relationship, right? Because perhaps you know about human design and they don't. And for you to be able to meet them at an energetic level just has so much power to support your co-parenting relationship. So I would love to hear from you when you think about these ideas. This was a few ideas, right? I wanted to build on that concept of, you know, working on our own mindset first, but I also wanted to leave you with some really practical things to consider in your co-parenting relationship. Most of the things we went through today are when you're trying to co-parent with somebody that you're no longer with, when you're no longer with your kiddo's other parent. These were some things to consider, but some of them are really relevant when you are in when you have a new partner in your life, or when your kid's other parent has a new partner in their life, that communication is also key. I think about when um when I when my boyfriend joined our family, and there were some things that we talked about and some things I had no idea to talk about, but we definitely were on the same page about discipline and disciplining the kids. And it wasn't that there was a lot of there wasn't really discipline in the home, but he was so clear that he would ask me if he needed me, if I needed him to step in, that he never stepped over my toes or stepped on my toes when things were going south with either of the kids, that he would sit back and listen when things were maybe escalating and would just wait for a cue from me to say, like, hey, I could use a hand over here. And although it was never explicitly said, we had been together for a couple of years, and I overheard him sharing this with a friend, that he felt like his role was to support me by always listening when things would escalate and to wait for me to ask him. And I thought, well, that's so interesting. I didn't know that he was doing this, but it was working so well. But I know that it doesn't always go that way. I know that sometimes, we invite people into our families, into our homes that don't know our backgrounds as well as we do, obviously, that don't know our kids, that don't understand our parenting style, that might have their own triggers. They might have their own, they will have their own paradigms about how kids are supposed to be parented based on what they've experienced. And, unknowingly, they may jump in or try to create what they perceive to be safety in the home, which might undermine what you're trying to do as a parent. And so, thinking about this idea of communication, communication has to always be at the front of this parenting dynamic. And when you can't get on the same page, there are some really great things that you can do to help regain safety in a communication exchange, which, if you don't know what those are, you want support with those, I'm happy to help you with that. I love helping people to not only shift the way that they're thinking, but also shift the way that they show up in tricky interactions, because I just find it so fascinating how at least for myself, before I had the tools that I have in my tool belt, I thought that it was inevitable. If somebody was pushing my buttons, being like, um, yeah, being provocative, pushing buttons, that it was inevitable that either my choice was to shut down and just totally disengage or to fight back. But I know that that isn't true, that there are some really powerful things that we can do in that conversation when we recognize what has happened to, like a ninja, like shift things around in a conversation to regain, I don't want to say control, but to regain productive communication, even when it's with somebody that you disagree with, even when the conversation gets heated. There are things that you can do in the moment to say words or take actions that can help put the other person at ease, get them off the defense, get them back to feeling safe to share their ideas where they don't feel like they need to attack, which puts you in a position to listen, to be present, to share your own ideas as well, and to be heard. But when we don't know these things, when we don't have these tools, we just push forward and we keep pushing, and then they push back and we push harder. Or we just completely shut down and decide that our opinion just isn't going to be part of the equation. But neither of those end results has to be the truth. There could be a third option, which is communicating with somebody who you do disagree with and still coming to a consensus about your kiddo. So if you're stuck, if you don't know what to do about that, I invite you to set up a connection clarity call where I can help you not only dissect what's happening in your most important relationships, but then also provide you with some options about how I can support you in that. So I hope that you found this episode powerful in your co-parenting relationship, and I would love to hear your thoughts about all of this. So share your thoughts, send me a message, and we will chat soon.